I know we're all really excited about those two huge games on the West Coast in the Big Ten Conference this week, but don't let that distract you from the fact that there's going to be some other really competitive games in Week 7. Let's go all around this big nation with my Week 7 Big Ten picks.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
Try to put yourself into this past summer. Try to take a trip into the time machine and imagine how you were feeling this summer, maybe in early August, late July, that type of frame. You were looking forward to this weekend, weren't you? You were looking forward to October 12th. What a huge Saturday of college football it was going to be when you were looking at it in the summer. And now, what a college football Saturday it is going to be now that it is here this weekend. I am so excited for this weekend. I know you are too. There are two huge games on the West Coast. We know Penn State going to the Coliseum to take on the USC Trojans. Ohio State and Oregon, that blackout atmosphere is going to be absolutely nuts at Autzen Stadium in Eugene. Those are two huge games that you're excited about, that I'm excited about. But there's some other really competitive matchups in the Big Ten that you should probably keep an eye on as you watch in your college football Saturday. But we are going to start on Friday. Let's start with tonight, Fox College Football Friday night, as we get my Week 7 picks underway. The Northwestern Wildcats traveling out to Crab Cake Country to take on the Maryland Terrapins. Northwestern, I think, gained some confidence last week in the way they played offensive football against Indiana. This was a team that was able to go back and forth and back and forth for 3-ish quarters before the Hoosiers eventually pulled away. I think Jack Lausch played a little bit better. This could maybe be a similar game to how it was against Indiana, where both offenses are going to be able to move the football, because I look at both defenses for the Wildcats and the Terps, and I think that they can have the ball moved on them. So I think we're going to see yards. We're going to see production. I think we're going to see points on Friday night. Not sold on either of these defenses being great right now. The stats tell that story, and the film tells that story certainly as well. So I think we're going to see points. I think this one hits the over, but I've actually got Northwestern covering, so plus 10.5 by a half a point. Maryland 31, Northwestern 21. I think we'll see some points on Friday night. Once again, it hits the over at 45.5. Let's go to Saturday. Big noon matchup, Washington at Iowa. I think this one comes down to which style of play is played in this one. Do we see that balance on Washington where they could be able to move the ball in a variety of ways, whether it's the run game with Jonah Coleman or the throw game with Will Rogers to guys like Giles Jackson and Denzel Boston, two of the Big Ten's best wide receivers statistically right now? Or is Iowa going to drag them down? Are we going to be able to play that rock fight, that grind it out type of game that Iowa wants to play? I think that's the difference in this game, depending on which way this one goes. Iowa favored by just 3 points at Kinnick Stadium. Can the Washington Huskies play a clean game and a disciplined game for the second week in a row? That's something else I've also got my eye on. You look at those losses early on this season against Rutgers and against Washington State. This is a team that committed a lot of penalties. This is a team that had a lot of miscues, and they just beat themselves. You do that against Iowa? Kirk Ferentz has built 20-plus years of Hawkeye culture on not beating themselves, on playing clean football, and they are one of the cleanest teams in college football this season. So if Iowa can get that run game going and they don't beat themselves, and if Washington doesn't play a clean game, I think that's siding big time with the home team in this one, siding big time with the Iowa Hawkeyes. How do I think this one is going to go? I think that this is a tough spot for Washington. You're coming off a big emotional win over Michigan at home last week. You got a 9 a.m. body clock game going across the country to Iowa City. I think Iowa can play their style of game in this one. This Washington defense is going to be tested. This is a very much improved unit. I think Steve Belichick is doing a really good job with this team, but I think Caleb Johnson gets back to doing Caleb Johnson things. Iowa does enough 20-17 over the Washington Huskies. This one hits the under, the 42.5, scoring 37 combined points. Also in the noon slot, Wisconsin going out to the East Coast to take on the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. The big question I think that we want answered in this game was last week's performance, scoring 52 on Purdue, just a byproduct of playing the bad Boilermakers? Or is this a Wisconsin offense that is actually gaining a lot of confidence, that is actually getting their footing? For the first time since Luke Fickell was the head coach and Phil Longo was the offensive coordinator, the first time in this regime, I looked and said, yeah, that's what the Dairy Raid is supposed to look like. Can they carry that confidence over against a Rutgers defense that can give up a lot of yards, specifically in the middle of the field? This was you look back to that Friday night game a few weeks ago, Washington put up over 500 yards of total offense against this Rutgers defense. But what do we know about Rutgers? They buckle down in the red zone. Bend but don't break for the Scarlet Knights. I think we're going to see a fair amount of field goals in this one. I think both defenses can have the ball ran on them. I think Kyle Monungai plus 100 yards in that game. I feel very good about him going over the century mark. Tawi Walker at Wisconsin. I think that he can also run the football on Rutgers and their defense. I think the key is which offense is going to be more balanced. Will Braden Locke have another good performance? Can he protect the football in this game against Rutgers? What about Ethan Kaliak-Manis? You saw last week against Nebraska, when you really put the ball into 16's hands, maybe it doesn't go that well. This is a Rutgers offense that we know needs to invest in the run game. I think the Badgers have a little bit more on offense right now. I've got Wisconsin going on the road and winning 27-23 over the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. This one hits the over that is slated at 43.5. Penn State going to the West Coast to take on the USC Trojans. This is the mid-afternoon kickoff on CBS. Now, I already did a very in-depth preview of this on the channel and the podcast feed, so if you want really more in-depth analysis on this game, go check that out. This is a spread, when I recorded my preview earlier in the week, that was sitting at 5.5. It has now come down to 3.5. I think USC is going to come out and they're going to be ready to play. I know there's a lot of people out there saying, hey, look at the matchups, Ted. Penn State is just going to overwhelm the USC tackles. They're going to be able to run the football. A lot of people are saying that Penn State is going to roll. But I think the Trojans know that their back is against the wall. If they want to be able to get into that college football playoff, that postseason, if they still want to have those types of goals, they need to win this game. Could we see a desperate type of USC team where they put a lot of chips out on the table in this game? There's a possibility I think that could happen. There's a possibility I think the Trojans could pull out a lot of stops in this game. So that's why I think that this one is closer. I've got Penn State 27 and I've got USC 21. This is still a Penn State cover. Purdue at Illinois. No Hudson Card for the Boilermakers. This one could be ugly yet again for the Gold and Black. Illinois is coming off of a bye week, and this is a ranked, really good Illinois football team. This is at home. It is a rivalry game. It is a trophy game. I think Illinois hits the over by themselves by a half a point. I've got the Illini 49, and I've got Purdue 6. The over-under is 48.5. In this specific football game, there's just way too much going on for the orange and blue for them to come out and this one to be competitive. Illinois rolls. The Minnesota Golden Gophers traveling across the country, going to the Rose Bowl for the first time since the 1960s to take on the UCLA Bruins at night. So you've got Minnesota coming off a big emotional win at home last week against USC. Now they got to travel across the country to take on a UCLA team that, even considering their record, this is a team that is fighting. And I think that this is a UCLA team, even though they're certainly in the bottom tier of the Big Ten. This is a Bruins team that is slightly improving with Deshaun Foster. I think UCLA is playing pretty well against the run this season. And you saw Minnesota get it together with Darius Taylor. That was really his best rushing performance of the season thus far. This is a Minnesota team that continues to get better week by week by week by week. They become more balanced. Their secondary on defense is getting a lot better. I think Minnesota is going to play their type of game again. I think they're going to drag down another West Coast team into a Midwest type of football game. I think that could be something like 16-14. I think it could be competitive out on the West Coast, something like beginning, middle of the fourth quarter. But the Gophers wear down the Bruins enough where they capitalize late and they win 23-14 and cover that -3.5 that they got going for them. I've got an Ohio State, Oregon in-depth preview on the channel and the podcast feed, so for more on that, go and check that out over there. But I didn't really say this in the preview, so I'll say it here now. I think the defenses are going to come out flying. I think that early in this game, the offenses are going to be trying to figure things out offensively. Like you saw last week where Ohio State only scored 7 points in the first half against Iowa. You saw Oregon turn the football over a couple of times against Michigan State. I think in the first half, they could be kind of getting their feet under them. I think the defenses are going to be good early on. You could see something like Oregon winning 10-7, something like that at halftime. And then I think in the second half, these offenses started to figure it out. They start to get in a rhythm. I think Oregon makes the explosive play late to be able to get the big win. Autzen Stadium is going to be absolutely rocking in this game. And I think that's the difference. This is the biggest game in Autzen Stadium history. The crowd will be a factor. If this game were in the Horseshoe, I might go the same score, but pick Ohio State. That's how much of the home field advantage is the difference in this game over there in Eugene, Oregon. It should be a fantastic weekend of college football. We've been waiting all summer for this specific weekend, smack dab in the middle of the season. Those are my picks. I want to hear your picks and thoughts. Leave them in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next edition of Big Nation. Enjoy your cinematic college football weekend.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms to stay in the know on all things Big Ten football.